All right, it's 6:30. Let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Royce Administration Building for the July meeting of the Jessamine County Board of Education. Mr. Moore, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Stephen Scrivener.
Here.
Denise Adams.
Here.
Amy Day.
Here.
Deborah Hood.
Here.
And Bobby Welch.
Here.
We have 5 present. We have a quorum.
Sir, do you have anyone leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening? Or?
You know what? I'm going to see if Randy Gooch would like to lead us in the pledge.
On the spot. Put on the spot,
We'll help.
right? All right, great. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It comes right back.
You did know.
Jessamine County Schools exist to motivate and challenge every child every day to be a caring, responsible citizen and a high-level thinker, performer, communicator, and learner for life. That's the Jessamine County Schools mission statement. Let it be the thing that guides our decisions each and every time we come together. And the board members had a chance to look over the agenda for this evening.
Yes.
Mr. Moore, do we have any recommended changes or edits to this?
No, sir.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments on it? All right, we have a motion to approve it.
Motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. All right. Everyone's had a chance, I believe, to look over the special board meeting minutes from June 16th and July 1st. Do we have any revisions needed to those?
No, they're good.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve the June 16th special board meeting minutes.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. And I'll also make a motion to approve the July 1st special board meeting minutes.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. All right, Mr. Moore.
First update is construction. Val's going to cover that. You should have 2 handouts.
We've got 2. We'll start with Providence School first. As you will see, we are lacking 1 item for substantial completion. I'll get into that, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I want you to be able to just see the building. If you haven't had a chance to drive at least by, it's gorgeous. It's really come a long ways. And you'll see that the pictures really have made a change. So those of you who are on the board, when we made the selection of the architectural firm, they did a phenomenal job of making that building look kind of exactly what we had wanted a long time ago. It's just unfortunate it's taken us all this time to get there. But you will see all the different pictures with the furniture in place and just where you are with this. We have 2 things going on in that particular space. Substantial completion is not yet complete because of a hardware issue having to do with the keying system, with the locks. The locks all work out there, so there's not any issues with that. The problem is the locks aren't aligned with our district keys. So in other words, right now, our master keys that we have as a district do not work in that particular building, but they have within their building the ability to lock up and stuff. So that's not the problem. So before school starts and we get kids back in that building, they will have changed that to master everybody else's. So our great grandmaster keys that we work will be able to open those doors that we have given to police officers and various other things. So that's the only thing that's sitting out there that keeps us from substantial completion. There is an issue that we're having with temporary, with a certificate of occupancy. We do have a temporary occupancy that lasts about 30 more days. There is an issue that we need to resolve having to do with the code-required work that wasn't in the original pricing that will have to be done at some point. I'm trying to negotiate that, but at the same time, I don't want the negotiations to hold up us getting into the building. So it may be one of those things that I have to bring back to you as a possible change order, but know that we can get that money back on the backside, given all the things that we've done that we've given as far as waiting for completion. I just don't want us to not be able to put kids in that building based off of a couple safety issues, which is like a strobe light that is attached to the fire alarm system in one of the bathrooms and an emergency light. That has to get done in some form, and I don't want to hold that to keep us from going. So you may see at our next meeting that change order in order to get that work complete. I don't know if you have had any discussion. I know there's been talk about trying to do one of our work sessions, hopefully the next one, possibly in that building, so that you can get a look. We're set to do that if everybody's ready to, so I think we'll be doing that at the August meeting.
Yes.
So, exciting. Any questions about Providence? And if you talk to Eric Sowers, he'll tell you it's the most beautiful building in the world.
Just so you know, the second to last page, the desk that has the stripes, those are lights. And it's like 5
Yeah.
different colored lights.
It's the receptionist desk as you walk in the main office.
Uh-huh.
They can actually say it's LED and it changes colors. So it can, I told them, if it ever comes in, it's red, does that mean it's not a good day?
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see if there's any coding that goes with that, but.
It's like a mood ring.
And I don't think it changes just based on people walking in the door, but I guess the person behind the desk can like send a message if they want. But it is really, really beautiful building. All right. The other one you have is from Tate Hill Jacobs with the work out of West High and East High. The CTE program, the building, the back areas for CTE are completely finished, furnished. The front offices at West High, they moved in furniture this week. In fact, started moving everything in. They've taken the wall down in West High's cafeteria. So they're very close to being done. East High's front offices are finishing up, should be done by the end of this week, so that they can begin to get everything into those as well. So the major portions of that particular project is done. JCTC work was over there earlier today, and everything is there. You'll see on the back a couple pictures from JCTC in the middle row. There's an overhang. That overhang that you see on the back side is what is at the north end of JCTC. It is actually where our print shop is, and that's one of the things that they'll be able to do for deliveries, and so they keep things under weather. And then you see the second picture, our phlebotomy lab. They took an old custodian room and remodeled it, and we've gotten furniture will be delivered sometime next week, where they will be able to then put in the phlebotomy chairs for the girls, ladies, and guys who are doing that program to be able to do the work that they need to there. So that is all done. We have one issue in that particular room, and that is they put the wrong tile down in a couple classrooms, and they have to go back and retake the tile up, but we've got plenty of time before school starts. East Jessamine High School, like I said, is pretty well done. West Jessamine High School work to still be completed. They're still working on the next phase, which is our agricultural area, where if you know where the old ag shops were in the back, that's where the welding lab's going to be ag shop, couple, and then 3 or 4 ag classrooms. That is work that they're working on now and hoping to have that done possibly even by fall break, and then we can start to make some other moves. But again, this is a very beautiful space as well. You see the front entrance to West High or East High. That front entrance as you walk in is a lot larger than what it was before, because they pushed the entrance out quite a ways underneath that overhang that they had. And really cool that they've taken their shield and actually put it onto the floor to actually make it a really neat entrance where they can incorporate some of that. So I also like the front entrance to West High. You see that as well as you walk up the front steps and see in.
Yeah, the entrance to West, I drive past it a few
Well,
times a week. It looks awesome.
Yeah, if you walk in and look back out throughout that, it is a significant change. And was there with Brady earlier today and Patty Elliott, and they were thrilled to death by just the change in the mood and everything else in there. So they're working on the cafeteria now to repaint it and get it all up to ready and what they need to do.
I can't remember, Val. Does that door stay that was the temporary door heading into the temporary office area on the side?
That will, but it will become solid doors. So what's windows now, because it's an emergency egress, so those doors will remain, but they'll be solid doors.
Is that 84% complete? Do I remember Margie telling us that the last 10 to 15% would be the slowest one?
The last 10 to 15% will probably be the entire year.
Okay.
So you've got a lot, 84% of the entire project.
84%.
Yeah, and thinking it's gone fast. But the problem is now we're having to finish certain areas, getting people moved before going to the next area. So it's kind of that shell game at this point.
Yeah,
So
understood.
this last 15% could take the entire year to get done.
Good deal. Thanks, Val.
Yep.
And next under superintendent's report, there are a couple items that I wanted to address, but I know the thing that you guys were wanting to hear is some of the thoughts from the health department, and specifically Randy Gooch, who's our director. So we have invited him at Stephen's recommendation. So,
All right, well, thanks for the invitation, Matt, Stephen. Glad to present to you tonight. Stephen wanted me to give an update kind of on the situation with COVID in Jessamine County. And these reports that you're seeing on the first 2 pages here, the graphic reports, these are always available on our website at jessaminehealth.org. You can go on there and get those cumulative data updated every day. And we generally have that updated about 2 o'clock every day, so you can stay up to date on the case rates. As you can see on here, as of July 27th, today, we've got 241 positive cases that we've had, but to date, 68 of those are currently active. All right, 6 new ones today, with 173 that's recovered. The important thing about that is when you see that 68's active, that means that we've had a lot of cases pretty recently, because generally the isolation period is about 10 days, and a lot of times, you know, their isolation is pretty much already finished just about by the time we even get the positive test back. Sometimes it takes 4 or 5 days to get the positive test back, so they only have another 5 days or a week or so of isolation. So that means that we've had a lot of cases over the last few weeks. And if you'll actually look down at the cases per week graph trending there, you can see that for the last 2 weeks, we ended last week with 54 cases. Week before that was 42. That 96 cases is representative of 40% of the total cases that we've had since COVID started in Jessamine County.
in the past 2 weeks.
Yes, the past 2 weeks. So that shows you the surge that we're having, which is almost representative of the surge that you're seeing experienced in Kentucky at this point in time. You hear the governor talk a lot about positivity rate relative to the number of positive cases that we're actually having in regards to the testing that's being done. And for a long period of time,
Like 2%, right?
well, for us, it's below 2%. For a long time, it's about 3.5% in the state of Kentucky. Kentucky's now surged to about 5.58%. Well, for us, you can look, the only information that we have for Jessamine County in regards to positivity rate is based upon the testing that we actually do. We can't get the cumulative data from all the different reporting labs that are actually doing tests from Jessamine County. Only the state gets that data, and they've not broken it down by county. But if you look at the second page, you can see the actual testing that we're doing at our facility. We've done 3,239 tests, okay? Of those, we've got 89 pending right now, but we started out averaging about a 1.5% positivity rate. Now that's up to a 2.1% positivity rate that's cumulative. But what the last 2 weeks tells us is that we're up to a 5.7% positivity rate, just like the state of Kentucky is. Basically, we're a little bit above the state of Kentucky in regards to the positivity rate. And we're seeing a lot more symptomatic folks that are actually coming through. When we look at the case rates for Jessamine County, about 78% of our cases have actually been symptomatic cases. Now, for our actual experience with the drive-through, we've had more asymptomatic cases that are actually coming through and testing positive. Right around the 68% rate is kind of what we're seeing with that within itself. I think when we're talking about the positive cases that we're experiencing, the age graph kind of gives you a good grasp too on the fact that it's spread throughout all age groups. And the age groups that we're actually seeing it increase in mostly now are pretty much between the 18 and 30-year-old age groups. And we're seeing more in the under 18 age groups that are popping up now as well. And that's one reason that I think that you've seen the governor take some of the actions that he took today with closing down bars for the next 2 weeks, you know, pulling back restaurant occupancy to 25%. He did, if you didn't know that, he actually did that today at 4 o'clock during his COVID update. So, you know, he's looking at the fact that a lot of these younger individuals are the ones that's out, transmitting, spreading COVID at a greater rate. And he knows that from that, it's going to spread to these other age groups that are more susceptible, to issues that can arise from COVID. We've been blessed in Jessamine County because to date, we've not had any deaths actually registered from COVID, which is a true blessing for us. About 20% of our cases have been in the age groups of 61 and above, which is pretty good. I think that means that our at-risk populations probably are being a little bit more conscientious. And at the same point in time, I think that our long-term care facilities have done a tremendous job in managing those populations. And, kudos goes to them, their administration, as well as their staff, because their staff are really susceptible to taking it into their facilities. So their protocols that they've got in place at those facilities, they've done an amazing job. We've had very few cases actually within our long-term care facilities, and that's what we're the most concerned about. When we look at the death rate across Kentucky, we've actually seen that 67% of the deaths have actually come from the congregate care settings. So that's what we're trying to protect the most. But we know that if we have this spread occurring in the younger age groups, then it's going to make those more susceptible populations, those vulnerable populations, susceptible to having COVID transmitted to them as well. So that's what we're the most concerned about at this point in time. Certainly with this surge that we're seeing, you may know that from a national perspective, they kind of designate red zones throughout the nation. Kentucky has now been designated a red zone, and what they look at with that is they look at when your case rates are about 100 cases per 100,000 of population, And Kentucky just entered that actual case rate with basically the last week that they've been in. Well, Kentucky's been seeing their cases rise for the last 6 weeks, When you look at our graph, you've seen that our cases have risen for the last 4 weeks pretty steadily, but the last 2 weeks pretty dramatically. When you look at our case rate, that 54 that we had last week sent us into 108 case rate, 108 per 100,000 of population, which means we're a red zone in the state of Kentucky as well. So we're seeing more transmission that is occurring. And a lot of people look at it and say, well, there's a lot more testing that's going on, so there's a lot more, cases. And that's true. But the fact that we look at those positivity rates going up means that there's a lot more transmission within our communities, I think that the thing that is more positive now with the mandatory masking, it seems like that we're always slow to accept government regulations, government directives in the smaller rural communities and outside of the urban areas. But just like me and Matt were talking, I think that I've seen in the last week, I think Jessamine County is starting to do better with the actual masking requirement that is occurring. I've seen that myself in going out into a lot of different locations. Obviously, we're still going to have non-compliance out there. And that's something that we have to work diligently on to try and get these people to understand why they need to come into compliance. And it's for the protection of everybody. It's for the protection of our businesses and our economy to stay open. But just to let you know, that's kind of the state of where we are in regards to COVID within itself. And we are seeing that surge. And I don't expect to see that go down very much because of all the travel that we're seeing right now. Every one of you sitting in this room probably already know somebody right now that's in those hot, states that have kind of been designated by the governor, and they're going to be coming back. You're going to have staff, right, that are probably in those particular states that are going to be coming back that you're concerned with, in regards to the reopening of schools. So kind of having those plans in place and how you respond to those particular situations are going to be important. Kudos to Matt and his team. I think that they've done an incredible job with the difficult and daunting task of trying to create a plan for reopening schools, knowing the type of responsibility that you have for bringing your staff and kids together, knowing that there's risk created when you bring anybody together like that. But I think that y'all got some, good plans in place, to be able to respond the way that you need to respond. If you do have a case in particular that arises, and you will have cases, you shouldn't go into the school year thinking that you're going to be scot-free, you know, and you're not going to have any positive cases that creep up, because you're going to have them. Just like we see them in daycares, you're going to have them in schools, right? You know, the objective is try to create an environment where when you have that case, you know who all that it impacts and affects. So you can really designate those folks and understand what you need to do at that point in time in regards to quarantining those students or those staff. You know, another thing that you have to manage as well is relative to the staff, you know, and their emotional well-being, with knowing that they're put more at risk with coming into classrooms, especially like we were talking about with the preschool and kindergartens, you know, knowing that there's not masking requirements that occur there, but recommendations for masking, you know, and I'm sure, you know, staff members will feel a little bit more at risk in those types of situations as well. So, you know, there's a lot that you have to manage relative to, you know, coming back to school. And it's not just related to the kids, but it's related to your employees as well. So that's pretty daunting within itself. You know, we're here to be a resource, but certainly when you have those positive cases or when we're going to jump in and kind of help you in regards to that investigation and the contact tracing and the quarantine mechanism that takes place. You know, probably what we will see is in the preschool and the kindergarten groups, if you have a positive case, probably more kids going to be related to being close contacts than probably some of your other grades if you've got good social distancing and masking going on within those particular environments. Generally what we see is with contacts, we generally see an average of about 2 to 3 close contacts per case that we have. But sometimes you have a significant number. You know, we had one case that we had 100 close contacts with, that you had to quarantine all 100 close contacts to be able to watch. We are now seeing that there's more close contacts that are becoming cases. And that's why we know that there's a higher level of transmission that's occurring right now, as well as we've seen relative to our caseloads actually increasing. But, you know, the third page, it provides you more specific data in regards to what you're seeing on the graphs themselves related to the percentages of age data and things of that nature like that, and by race. You might notice we have a significantly higher percentage of Hispanic population that are positive cases versus what our actual population is for Hispanics. So that's kind of interesting. And you've seen that on the state level as well related to that. So that's some of the data that I just kind of wanted to provide you with, kind of give you an overview of the situation that we were in now and how we are seeing the cases escalate. And it's not going to slow down. It's summertime. People want to get out. They want to enjoy themselves. We've been seeing them enjoying themselves. You know, the governor showed a picture of a lot of people at the bar in Lexington this weekend enjoying themselves. And that's what's causing a lot of the, you know, the positive case transmission that is occurring.
Randy, with the 68 active cases we have right now, what are your feelings on how are those people doing with quarantine? Are you having any issues with getting those 68 people to quarantine and isolate, or are you having to fight some of them that still want to walk through Kroger without a mask?
Yeah, you know, for the most part, we've had pretty good compliance with our folks. You know, I've only had one person that I've had to get a court order for isolation. All right, and the day that we, the day after we actually give him an isolation order for him to stay home, we were taking him a mask, and he was out working on one of his friend's vehicles out in the front of his house, standing right there with him, you know, at the truck, no mask on or anything. Of course, his friend didn't know that he was positive COVID, right? Well, we got in touch with him and said, listen, what are you doing? You can't be doing that. Oh, well, I didn't understand. I promise you I'll be okay. Well, we find out the next day he's in an accident in Lexington because he's going to visit a niece that's in the hospital. Right? And he has an accident, so law enforcement has to come, and he gets a ticket written up. And his wife calls him on us, calls us on him. So at that point in time, we had to get a court order to basically say, you know, you got to stay put. You have to stay in place. So you do have some folks that you know are going to be non-compliant, but for the most part, we've had compliance. A lot of them don't like to sign the orders. You know, they'll tell you, I'm going to quarantine, but I'm not signing an order. Well, if you sign an order, it's the only way that, we can trust that you're going to quarantine. So, we have those back and forth issues sometimes. But I've been blessed. My medical director, Dr. Davis, he was a acting commissioner for public health and the deputy commissioner at the state for about 20 years. And, because he is that physician, usually I can get him on the phone with some of these folks that are non-compliant, and he can kind of help talk them through it and walk them through it, and we get a little bit more compliance from that perspective. But now, do I think that everybody that we give a quarantine order probably staying home in quarantine? Not all of them. Do I think that about half the time they're lying to us about their contacts? Yeah, probably so, because I've caught them. Had a positive case that went to church that didn't say anything about being at church, right? And we didn't know it until we had another positive case that come from church, and she told on me, because she was in contact with him, and he was a positive case. So, you find those things sometimes down the line where you understand, that you're going to have people that are not going to tell you the whole truth, but we do the best that we can to understand who's at risk and those populations that need to be quarantined, to make sure that we're trying to protect the other folks that they could be placing at risk and coming into contact with.
So Randy, when you look at our data, is there any way to just kind of look at that trend and give us some kind of a range of time that you would sense that it would take before we could potentially be out of that red zone? Is there?
Well, what ends up happening is because the incubation period is 14 days. That's why you see when the governor takes action, it's like he said, we're closing down the bars for 2 weeks, okay? When they take those actions, they look at 14-day stints because they figure if everybody's compliant, within those 14 days, then what that does is, it's kind of like if you shut the whole economy down and you required everybody to stay at home for 14 days, you would expect after that 14 days, we'd kind of be free and clear. All right. But with the essential services and all those things that we have, we never truly are shut down. So, this type of a surge, the best thing that they can do is relative to even the White House guidance. I had the pleasure of being at a meeting with the governor and Dr. Stack, Commissioner Stack, and Dr. Birx from the White House advisory team, the task force. And she basically said the things that Governor Beshear did today, which I think he was already, in tune with doing. That's the things that she said. Close your bars, reduce your capacity to 25%, make sure that you don't have groups of greater than 10 that, are congregating. And when they're saying that, they're talking about the social gatherings. You see a lot of barbecues and things of that nature now. When they went up to groups of 50, you started seeing cars everywhere in neighborhoods, didn't you? People are ready to come together, and that creates a little bit more risk. But when you say that, Matt, containing or mitigating and lessening those surges are going to be all related to the compliance that we get from everybody that lives in our community. And I think that sometimes it sees people seeing those surges and seeing, the retraction of some of the economy that has been opened up to really get the point that, hey, I'm going to have to start complying. I'm going to have to start doing my part in order to manage and maintain this in a way where we can continue to stay open. We can continue to work. We can do the things that we need to do in living life just a little differently. And certainly that's why the masking is so important that we talk about. But yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you that we wouldn't have this surge, for another 2, 3, or 4 weeks, but it's hard to see. And one thing that Dr. Birx had said is she basically said that Florida, Texas, Arizona, all these states that you saw significant surge in and higher death rates, she said that she had the same conversation with them when they were at lower positivity rates and, just starting to see some of the surge that was taking place there. She had the same conversations. You know, they just didn't react quick enough. And I think that that's what Governor Beshear is trying to do. He's trying to be proactive, and he's trying to react a little more quickly so we don't see those significant surges. But there's no doubt in my mind that, you know, people have taken it to the Floridas and the Arizonas and the Texases, and they're coming back north. And that's kind of what we're seeing now.
Anybody got any questions or comments? Mr. Good?
I do. And I certainly don't mean to be disrespectful, but I'm the biggest conspiracy theorist ever. I'm not. But I wanted to know, since there's so much that we hear from different sides that say that there's what's positive is false and what's false is positive. And when you are designated a positive, that when you're asked who you've been in contact with, they count you and the 15 others that you've been in contact with as positive. Is that correct or no?
No,
Okay.
that's false.
From here, it looks false, absolutely false.
Yeah.
So with that type of reporting, do you think that's just in other places or that's just misreporting?
I think that that's misreporting.
Okay.
I think that that's people, you know, you have all sides of media,
Sure.
right? And it's all comes down to who do you believe, right? And whose reporting do you believe? Well, I can tell you our reporting is true and accurate. And when you kind of look at our testing, you know, you can kind of see that within itself. But, you know, the way that disease investigation and contact investigation works, none of those contacts are reported as positive. You know, they've got different designations as presumptive positive and things of that nature. If they've not been tested, but they've been a close contact and they've got the similar symptoms, they would designate them as presumptive positive, but delay that until they're actually tested to see if they're positive or negative at that point in time. And sometimes that's why you might see some adjustment to the data. But generally, we don't even have those presumptive
Well, I mean,
positive
just
within our
page,
data.
I thought, well, that's not happening here.
Yeah.
As far as, but, you know, you hear, you know, Florida, they completely lied about their, you know, their numbers and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But, and I also want to ask, the tests that you use, are they from the same company or the same, or do you use variations?
Yeah.
Which lab do you use?
All of
Use the same one?
our tests right now are going through the gravity testing process with the state. So we use gravity testing. They're all PCR tests, you know, where we're doing the nasal swabs on those. They're not the rapid tests or anything of that nature. Now, this gravity testing project is probably going to run out probably midpoint in August. But we've been blessed. We actually received a grant from the state lab, the Department of Laboratory Services, and they're going to be providing us the capacity and the capability to actually do testing through them. So the testing that we move forward with after the gravity project is finished, we're actually going to be sending that and having that tested at the state lab.
I have a question. What's the difference in the quick test and the 5-day test? Are they virtually the same, or is one more accurate than the other?
Yeah, the PCR test, as long as they're PCR, and you know, I'm not an expert on all of that testing, but the polymer chain reaction test that they do, they say that they're more accurate. Okay. Now the rapid test that they do can still be a PCR test. Okay, and they still do the nasal swab.
Okay.
They just have the ability to use equipment, basically portable equipment that they do that test through, that they can run it in 15 or 20 minutes or so. And, you know, those have been designated through the FDA as having a sensitivity rate good enough that they can be, you know, they can be discerned as being accurate when you get one. Now, could there be a false positive? Yeah, there could be a false positive, but the rate of false negatives are more than what a rate of false positive would be. And before that, they will actually even give them an emergency authorization use designation or whatever it might be for them to be utilized. They have to demonstrate that there's a sensitivity rate, you know, that is high enough that they're not going to have a huge number of false positives.
Yeah, versus the health department, when someone's positive, quarantine for 14 days, do people's personal doctors also follow that guideline as well?
Yeah, we've had, I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. Now, when you say quarantine for 14 days, if a person is positive, they're designated to isolate. And that isolation only occurs for 10 days, okay? Because there's an incubation period that we go by, okay? But when they're positive, they're designated to isolate for 10 days or until they are 72 hours symptom-free, okay? So they have to be symptom-free for 72 hours. If you get to 10 days and they've still got a cough that has not gotten better, they're still running a fever, they continue to be isolated until they actually have 72 hours fever-free or cough-free or improvement that is actually being shown, okay? Now, if they're designated as a close contact, then they have to quarantine for 14 days, okay? And what they do is that 14 days is they take that 14 days from the actual date of onset contact, okay? Like if they were contacted and that person, we know that they were positive in that period of time, then they have to quarantine for 14 days. And we have no testing mechanisms because they could contract that disease within 14 days. They just can't go and test and say, hey, I'm negative, let me go back to work. You have to quarantine because that incubation period can be up to 14 days that they can contract the disease.
Is there a test to tell whether someone has had COVID?
There's some antibody tests out there. The Centers for Disease Control has not recommended an antibody test yet. You know, we're hoping that they come out with something in the next month or two. You know, because that's kind of what we've been waiting on. We've been waiting on the CDC to designate an antibody test because what you have with some of the antibody tests that have been approved out there, they can pick up antibodies from the different types of coronaviruses that exist. There's 4 or 5 different coronaviruses that those tests could actually pick up an antibody from, and that could kind of give them a false sense of security in regards to them thinking that they had COVID. So there's only a couple of different tests that they say that are pretty accurate in regards to only designated the COVID-19 RNA. So that's kind of what they're looking at that with that antibody, and that's kind of what we're waiting on. I mean, we would love to have an antibody test just so we can kind of see, you know, what the transmission has been throughout Jessamine County, you know, and test enough folks. But some of the testing that you've seen some of the universities do, and some of the universities, the research universities, and those folks can actually go and do these research studies with some of these antibody tests, and they do the blood serums and stuff with those antibody tests. And, you know, they've shown that there's been a lot more transmission in the community than what we actually show. And we expect that. You know, it's kind of like if we think that we've got a 5.7% positivity rate right now, we could go and test 10,000 people and, you know, we would probably have, 5,700, people or so that's going to be positive, right? That's kind of the way that we look at that, and it's kind of the way that we sense it. But yeah, antibody test, hopefully they're going to be coming soon, because I can't tell you how many times that I've heard people say, well, I think I had it back in December. I think I had it back in January because they tested me for flu and I didn't have flu. And it could very well be true. It very well could be true. I've had several physicians that have said, we were seeing something that looked like flu, but it wasn't testing positive for flu. So a lot of them have said, we think that it was here back in December. So there could have been a lot of, but the other thing that we're concerned about is we're seeing people that have been tested positive for COVID, 6 to 8 weeks later, testing positive for COVID again. So it's like antibodies are not being developed that's protective. And that's some of the studies that are going on right now. Whether or not a person that is infected and sick are creating protective antibodies, generally like you do with any other virus, okay, that you contract. It develops the antibodies, and then you have some immunity to that in the future. We're hoping that we're going to have that level of immunity in the future, but probably not going to be confident about that until we actually get an approved vaccine that we're able to do, enough herd immunity with.
Who actually does the antibody test? Is it the regular doctor, or it's not too often, so it'd have to be like a regular physician?
It could be, and we may be doing them too. Once they recommend an antibody test, once the CDC.
No, I'm saying is, I have a person here in town that supposedly tested positive and did his quarantine was tested for the
For antibodies?
They never,
Yeah.
Never had it, so.
They can-
Which one, did
Oh.
you never have it, or did you have it?
Yeah, a regular physician can actually take a blood sample and send it to a laboratory, and they can do antibody testing for that. So that's a way for it to be done too. I know Solaris Labs here locally, they do some of that testing as well. So, those are some of the things that we would like to be able to do as we move forward. But we're moving forward, toward utilizing rapid testing because most people don't want to wait 4 or 5 days. We've been blessed with Gravity Labs. Their turnaround time for us has pretty much been between 24 and 48 hours. But we've only had the capacity of we've been doing testing about 2 days a week. We've seen that that's kind of what the demand has been for us to actually do that level of testing. But ours has been 24 to 48 hours. Can't tell you how many times in the beginning when all this occurred that we would have people that were finished with isolation by the time we actually got their positive test results back. And you're talking about making it difficult, to do contact tracing. I mean, it's just amazing. Well, okay, we got a positive test, but they're out of isolation period because it took us 10 days to get the test back. It's.
Can the actual swab test, do they detect anything else but COVID-19?
No, with the PCR, no. That's what that's what that testing is for, is the COVID-19.
Just for my sake, probably, can you reiterate again the red zone? How long do you think it's going to take us to your best guess of what kind of time period are we looking at? Assuming a high compliance
Yeah.
from the community, what are we looking at as a community here? How much longer do you see us being in this kind of state of emergency?
Yeah.
And Randy, reiterate as well what's needed from the community to help get to the other side of that, please.
Okay. Well, that would be a lot of speculation in regards to how long that we would actually stay there. I mean, given the fact that we've seen this trending up the last 4 weeks, and it's been significant the past 2 weeks, I would expect that with travels and things of that nature, that we're probably going to see this increase for the next couple of weeks. But I would hope after another 14 days that we would start seeing it come down a little bit more. Relative to, the governor's actions that he's taking and pulling back a little bit on things. But at the same point in time, we're an open economy now, and you've seen that, right? And I'm sure that everyone in here, when kids come back to school, you don't expect that they've been cooped up at home, right? They've been out at the parks. They've been playing with kids in the neighborhood. They've been all around too, right? They just generally have. But I think what we have to do as a community is we're going to have to realize that we're not going to be able to mitigate this if we don't do the social distancing and the masking. And I think, there's only so many tools that we have in a toolbox when we're talking about a novel virus, okay, that we don't have therapeutics for and we don't have a vaccine for. So, that means that we either masking, social distancing, not either, it's all and, we're masking and social distancing and washing our hands and sanitizing, okay, while allowing, the health department to do our, containment that we can do. Unfortunately, when we see cases surge at the rates that they are, it's very difficult to do containment. You're pretty much in the mitigation mode at that point in time. But that's what our community has to do. If we're not doing those things, then it's going to be very, very hard for us to stay plateaued. And that's why we're not plateaued. The governor reacted very quickly early on. All right. And we stayed plateaued while, we had a limited amount of the economy working. Just as soon as those things open back up, we've seen what that trend has done. Okay, and it's went into the surge now. And, would it have been better if it was around the wintertime? It probably would have. People wouldn't have been apt to go out on vacations and things of that nature. They'd probably stayed more confined to some degree. But the fact that all this fell right in the summertime, and what did everybody think? Everybody thought, oh, this is like the flu. Been compared to the flu so much. Everybody thought, well, come summertime, come the warm weather, it'll just all kind of go away. But we've seen that that's not happening, especially when people saw the surge that they saw in Florida, right? Then they knew it wasn't reacting like the regular normal flu within itself. But yeah, to predict how long that the surge will last is very, very difficult to say. Do I hope that we're on the downward trend by the time that we get close to those school opening dates? Certainly I hope so, and certainly you all hope so too, because those are going to be hard decisions to make, right?
But the past 2 weeks that you said that we've had the surge,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
the past 2 weeks that we've had the surge, I don't know if you questioned anybody or if it's just a blank, come in and test. But did those individuals say that they had been out of state, or they had, what was the factor, do you think, between the time that we were kind of plateauing and going down till now it's surging back up? I mean, I know you referred to the travel, but do you think these individuals were traveling and coming back? Is that what they've?
A lot of them have been traveling. A lot of them have been traveling, but it's just, the general openness of the economy too, And sometimes it's hard to trace back exactly where they actually contracted the virus at, and sometimes that is so difficult because, you don't know everywhere that they've been. And unless you actually have clusters, like a daycare cluster or a church cluster or something of that nature where you've got a lot of folks connected to the same place, it's really hard to know where one individual actually contracted it at to some degree. But we have had a lot of folks that have actually traveled, and we think that that's the biggest reasons right now for that.
Anything else for Randy? Mr. Goose, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us. We really appreciate your time.
All right. Well, thanks for inviting me in.
Yeah, and I will just say how appreciative I have been of Randy all the way through this process. He's obviously helped us with different cases where we've had to initiate contact tracing, but then more so than anything, he's helped us with all of the operations that we still have in existence. Our food service operations, we ran that by the health department to make sure that we were doing that as safely as possible. Our phase 1 initiation for athletics, they were very helpful to us as we laid out those plans. And then just our day-to-day operations. We have central office open right now. All of our schools are open at some level, and you guys have been very supportive of that. So I just appreciate the guidance and support that you give us.
Yeah, you're welcome. And y'all have always been a great partner. So that's how we accomplish what we do, right? Thank you
again, Randy.
Thanks, Randy.
Sobering.
Yeah. So obviously with that information that Randy shared, I think we've all sensed that we have seen that increase locally that we're hearing more and more about, that we heard more about today, and that the governor has been communicating to us in the past few weeks. And I do feel like if we are making any decisions for any adjustments to our plans, I would recommend that we do something like that sooner than later, because I know our families have to plan accordingly. And I would really like to, because I have been carrying on conversations with our administrators have been tracking other information. For instance, we have had a much larger percentage of our families who had identified they wanted the traditional model that are now requesting that they shift to the virtual model.
What's that number?
It was in the low 20s. Today it's 31% that have made the request. So, and that really, we didn't really see that strong shift until about the middle of last week. And I can tell you that there are other families, because we've closed that window, but there are lots of other families that are requesting to go back in and to be able to
So what do
change
we
that.
do? I've had 2 contact me today,
Yeah.
and they still switch.
Yeah. So I really think we've got to just decide what our plan is moving forward before we open that model back up. But just what I'm recommending is that we come back together, and I would love it if we could do that as soon as Wednesday.
This week?
Wednesday of this week, if at all possible, to see if I can make a recommendation for you guys for how we move forward.
Yeah, and I think that was, kind of as a board, what we wanted to approach this deliberately tonight.
Yeah.
And hear from Randy and hear from you, give your team a chance to process what the governor said today and sleep on it a little bit and not rush into anything. So, yeah, I think
I will be out of town on Wednesday. I probably can't come. So.
We could do that one as a virtual meeting, if that works.
I'm supposed to be in the woods.
Okay.
I mean, what time do you think?
Yeah. We could do it at 5 or 6.
that's fine with me. Yeah.
On Wednesday night.
What, a 5
She
o'clock
works
time work?
Wednesday night too, so could we do Thursday?
And I could do early or late, which
I'm gonna be in late Thursday, but I can do it virtually.
You could do it earlier on Wednesday?
Yes, I do it early.
Could you do it, Denise, earlier on Wednesday?
Like what time?
I can do, say, 4.
It's fine with me.
Works good for you?
Bobby, how about you? You're the one, you've got a little bit different.
You do anything, baby.
That's why they call you boss.
Write that one down.
We can do that virtually if you want to send out a Zoom, and then you might.
I mean, would y'all want to do it virtually, or do you just want to come in here at 4 o'clock on Wednesday?
I just want to come here.
Okay.
Well, I can't because I'll be gone.
Okay, we can Zoom you in then maybe?
I may be on the road on the way here, but I'll zoom in first.
Okay.
Okay.
We can talk more after the meeting about scheduling, but we said 4 o'clock on Wednesday?
Sure.
Okay.
And to just, I know we haven't spoken it directly, we've just made reference to it, but just in case you guys weren't able to hear the governor's recommendation, he did recommend that everyone be virtual until, or through August 17th. And just a reminder, our start
meeting will
date.
become,
Ours went until
so the
26th.
Providence meeting,
No,
That's, I'm talking about students returning.
got you.
Yeah, so he's recommending that students not return to traditional instruction until after August 17th. And I know that he's relying on seeing that trend going down, the same, that information that Randy shared with us earlier. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of that.
So if I may try, I might be able to do it virtually on my phone if I have service.
okay.
I can try.
Okay.
Now, so I'll just FaceTime.
So is there any plan to reach back out like now or open up that survey type stuff again before you make a recommendation? I mean, we've heard Randy's input, the governor's. I mean, what are our constituents say here? Like, you're saying that number's 31 now, but that's based on data of how recent?
We closed that window last week, beginning of, I think it was Tuesday of last week.
Actually, that form was open all the way to Sunday morning.
This Sunday?
Yeah, this past, yesterday is when I shut down. My parents didn't know they could access it, but I still had a whole bunch of people filling it in all the way through yesterday.
But the window was closed, like we told the parents
It's
that it was through
publicized as
Tuesday.
being closed
On
On
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
But there were quite a few who were
So-
communicating with schools that continued to input it. And then I closed it down yesterday morning and cleaned up all the duplicate entries and all that kind of stuff.
Understood.
Did you see that there were 4 parents in the high school age group?
It was pretty balanced on that cross.
No, I was saying is that they wanted to come all week instead of just 2 days.
That
that was an
wasn't even,
option
that
that-
wasn't even a question.
That I've had
so
more people say, why are we just going 2 weeks or 2 days? Why can't we go?
that wasn't part of the three I would have
I didn't know if anybody had just.
And I've had that communicated
Yeah,
as
and
well.
I have to.
And it wasn't so much that they had younger kids as well that were going, it was just like, my kid needs to be there. This is, their senior year, their junior year, and they need to be there.
Yeah.
So I don't know, what was the actual purpose for just
Yeah,
going 2 days?
so if we went to the 5-day or even a 4-day, we still have the same staff. So, we still have the same staff that are available at the high schools. And the thing that's really, really unique to Jessamine County that we're so proud of, and it kind of worked against us from the COVID side, but we offer more electives than any single district. There are districts that are area technology centers that can offer the variety that we do. But if you look at Jessamine County, it's unbelievably unique. And that's something that we invested in intentionally. You know, if you just think of the construction projects, you know, we have military leadership program and we don't even have that grant. And you know, the number of pathways, the number of certifications. So we've really put ourselves in a situation to where we have lots and lots of certified teachers at the high school that are very uniquely certified to do something special. And you know, the simple examples are fire science, the medical profession, our law program. So you know, while we have all of those standard content areas that other districts have, we've got a whole lot of other teachers that are dedicated to these unique pathways. So when we started talking about offering a virtual model and a traditional model at the high school, the only solutions that we had were to really significantly drop the number of courses, the types of courses that students were going to have access to, or to try to do a hybrid model. Because what we are doing right now is, you know, we only have one law teacher. So he's teaching all of our virtual students and all of our traditional. So if he were to just be the traditional teacher, you know, work that, then he would only be able to teach students that are traditional. You know, we may be able to carve out a period for him to do something virtual, but what we couldn't do of a teacher like that is say, we want you to teach a full caseload during the day and then teach all the virtual stuff at night. Because what we're also realizing is every single thing that we're doing is causing quite a few more steps. You know, just our traditional classes, there's going to be a whole lot of new expectations of teachers on just the cleaning protocol and the space that they're operating in, on getting their students from point A to point B, on the mask expectations and supervision. So it really did boil down to us having to trim our courses. And you know, again, Jessamine County, I believe, is still one of the only districts in the state that offers an associate's degree. The number of advanced placement courses, the number of dual credit, we really have extended ourselves out to create as many opportunities for our students. And we were really trying our hardest to keep all of those things intact, so that, you know, the next year students will have fulfilled those obligations that they've committed to get that associate's degree, or, you know, to move on to college or to obtain that certification. So that's really the biggest unique challenge. And, you know, they talk about some of the unique challenges that Jefferson County has had and Fayette County that have led down to some of their decisions. I think we are unique in that sense with our career and technical education.
We're absolutely unique, especially when, you know, everyone has been so successful with big GI days.
Yeah.
You know, that Fayette County wouldn't even consider. I mean, they wouldn't do it. And now they're having to go completely online. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know.
Yeah.
So for us to be successful with that, you know, changing that, you know, narrative for just days that, you know, snow days or whatever,
Yeah.
to keep our kids at the same pace. I see that virtual and traditional school learning, but I think it's kind of, it's enabling for those that need virtual, but it's kind of hobbling the ones that, you know, need that structure that to be at school. But then also, you know, the dynamic of trying to keep everybody spaced and you know, clean and, you know, so nobody gets sick. But it was confusing to a lot of parents why elementary and middle school were going every day and then not to the high
And I
school.
think the scheduling at a high school is completely
Oh,
different.
I would- yeah,
I mean, it's completely different, and it's not at high school. It's not really about a 1-year plan. It really is about that comprehensive 4-year plan. And so the other thing we had to look at was the domino effect over time of if we're not able to do this year, then that's going to prevent that kid, whether they're virtual or traditional, even if we did 5 days of instruction in person and still had the virtual, we would have to significantly reduce the scheduling options so much that then it would create a domino effect for all students that, okay, so if they can't do that this year, then that prevents them from being able to do this the next year, which then really messes up their whole ILP graduation
That's exactly what I'm
plan,
saying.
things like that. There's just a lot of domino effects at high school that you don't experience at elementary and middle. And equity issues.
And you know, the things that the State Department is really encouraging and promoting as far as pathways and stuff, you know, I think that is a level of pride for Jessamine County, because I really think they're trying to build up structures across the state that are similar to what we're currently doing. But unfortunately, that doesn't help us trying to resolve the challenges we're facing with.
I have a question. What about teachers? Are there teachers that if they choose to do virtual versus in-house, is that gonna be possible, or how will that work?
So we are looking at those literally, we did a survey to see what the interest was, and then we're looking at those literally individually, because, you know, if there's a health-related situation and we can identify a placement for them, by all means, we're gonna do that. But that is part of that whole planning process of making sure that we're putting everybody where they need to be.
Has anybody in the community, and I guess I'm thinking specifically in Jessamine County, got a plethora of churches. Is anybody in the community reaching out and saying, how can we help schools? How can we help families?
So what we've done, Denise, and this is through the Family Resource Center, as we're getting those communications from a church, an individual, because we've had people that have wanted to donate and they didn't know exactly what the cause was, or they wanted to volunteer time. What we've been doing is tracking that information, and we've got a database that the Family Resource Center coordinators are managing. So when we have a need for something, then they're starting there and seeing, you know, what resources have been offered from the community, and we're making those connections. And in some cases, where people have wanted to donate food and resources, maybe like we've had people that have wanted to donate clothing. We've made connections with other agencies and then have started communicating. You know, it's not necessarily been that Jessamine County has set up a clothing store at one of our schools, but what we've done is gotten that resource connected to an agency that is providing that. So I feel like our Family Resource Centers have done a really nice job with that. And Beth
Do you
has
think the
been,
community's aware of how, I mean, can we somehow publicize that if there are individuals or organizations that, you know, and I guess I fear that at some point we could be shut down, and we're gonna have a lot of families who are, like the Asbury family, that email I read earlier, they've got to decide if if the husband's gonna work and pay the bills, or if the wife's gonna work and carry insurance. And, you know, what a horrible position to be in. And frankly, that's not even the worst of the cases we have.
Yeah.
I guess I think about the places I used to visit a lot, the trailer parks and those places. And, I understand the concern for high school kids, but when I think long-term, I think of those kindergarten, first and second graders that are missing critical learning.
Have we had a lot of requests for homeschools?
We've had some.
For homeschool versus virtual?
Yes, and we've had some that.
Well, my experience was, they were saying that if they had to go to virtual, or back to what we had in the past, 3 months of school, that they would not do it.
I really think
Just because the dynamic changed, finally, got back to work, and there's nobody watching the kids, so homeschool is their only option, because the virtual school or NTI type work, they could not access during the day because the parent worked and they were with the grandparents, or vice versa. So their only option was homeschool because it fit with their narrative of their daily lives.
And virtual school does need to be done on the schedule.
Right.
I'm right, yeah.
But it was just the situation, with, particular family and, I hate, not that it's anything wrong with my school, but to say that this is my only option.
And what about those folks that don't have computers and don't have access?
Yeah, and we are working with another organization, and we are planning on giving out those devices and trying to get hotspots for those devices when they can access. But there could be parts of the county that's not obtainable. But
So I understand that Time Warner or Spectrum is working with some school districts to set up hotspots on buses, and they can take them to certain subdivisions and stuff, and it'll pick up so many.
And I've seen some of that, and then what we're looking into are actually giving them devices that have hotspots, so that they can utilize it. Yeah. Because some of these places that I think we're looking at, it's a small group of students here, and then, they're kind of spread out. It'd be harder, although we could pick them up and take them.
What about our food service? What are we gonna do there? If we could, just like you said.
Yeah, so what we're doing with the traditional, like if we did a all virtual, then we would continue to do services the way we've done all summer. If we do traditional, obviously the students will be eating on the campus. And then if we do the traditional virtual model, those students that are virtual would just have the opportunity, the same that they have in the summer, to come by school and pick up those meals. We are going to try to do something like that, if that were the case, where it'd be like 1 day a week, so that they could pick up all of their food as opposed to 2 meals per day or something like that. Try to limit the number of trips they would have to have. And Denise, when you talk about the volunteers, it is amazing the number of volunteers that are doing that.
Picking up food.
That are
yeah.
picking up food and getting it to the homes where they don't have transportation.
Is there any way of knowing if there's the specific, because
Yeah.
our huddle time group has been doing that for our
Yeah.
huddle, for lots
Yeah.
of kids, but is there any way of knowing
Yeah.
who needs that and is
Yeah.
not getting that?
So we have sent out multiple communications through the family resource centers and through the schools. If you're having challenges in this range of areas, call your family resource center coordinator. And that's the way we've been working that
Okay.
now,
Okay.
to where, they have that.
Yeah.
And they've already, with most of our families, already developed those relationships and kind of know the individuals going into it. So that's been our approach to this at this point. Again, they came up with a really nice design for how we can track all of that and make sure we're not missing out on somebody that's wanting to support, or vice versa, somebody that's in.
Matt, was there anything else in your superintendent's report? It's probably the longest superintendent's report.
Just a real quick, and this is like a 10-second, I do want to commend our athletic programs. We receive audits for Title IX, and we had a very favorable audit. And when I say favorable, that means that we are supporting programs for male and female athletes, and it's very balanced. There were some cases that the female programs were funded better, or more so than the boys' sport. So again, I commend our ADs and everybody involved in athletics in Jessamine County for helping make sure that we've got balanced programs.
Any board member communications?
I've already read mine.
That's all we've done, eh?
I was gonna say, we just finished that. Teresa, do we have any audience communications? All right, that moves us to the consent agenda. We have got, 35 items on there. Are there any questions or comments about those items from the board?
I think we've covered all these in work session.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. All All right, that brings us to the action items. Looks like we've only got two. I know that, Michelle, thank you, by the way, for sending us that summary.
This was nice.
That was a very nice way to go through and quickly see what we were looking at,
Yeah.
so I really appreciate that. Do we need any questions or comments on that from our end?
I will tell you this quickly, all of the adjustments that we made on here were the Kentucky School Board Association adjustments that were based on regulations, and we were able to remove a couple because of some new practices. But again, you guys saw the summary, so it's my recommendation that you approve this first reading, knowing that the next time we meet, there will be a second reading on the same.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. All right, Mr. Moore, you want to tell us a little bit about number 2?
Yes, this is just to receive approval for the child nutrition program procurement plan. This is something that we do annually, and I'm just recommending that you guys approve this so we continue our same practices.
So we can what?
Continue the same food service procurement practices.
Any questions or comments? I'll make a motion to approve item G2.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Mr. Welch?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.